to start with some questions for Edmund on ADHD.
Yeah.
Some interesting stuff that's come in on ADHD.
Okay.
First of all, a couple for you, Edmund. Do you think companies should be actively seeking out those with ADHD to help drive innovation and creativity? And hold on to that thought. The second one, could a manager with ADHD cause issues as they lead their team in a business due to their rapid task changing and expectations of others? So these are both questions, both on a potential negative and a potential positive, around how ADHD integrates into the workplace.
Could you hold on to the second question for me? Because I won't be able to remember it. So the first question, should companies, and do you mean pharmaceutical companies? Is that, you think?
We just have the companies.
So there's two questions. Should companies? The obvious answer is yes, they should. Will companies? They probably will pay lip service to this increasing focus on participation of patients, but actually that's all it will be. And to be fair, they have done that over many years, but they essentially use it as a marketing crutch to convince prescribers that they are taking on board the views of patients. But and you saw my disclosures, I have worked with quite a lot of pharmaceutical companies over the years. And I think you have to realise what drives the company's policies, and it's not really, how shall I put it, a genuine attempt to incorporate the views of patients, I would say, except where it helps sell product. Is that too harsh? Anybody from the pharmaceutical companies here? Probably is. But that's my view anyway. Yeah.
Thanks.
What was the second one?
The second one was about could a manager with ADHD potentially cause problems for their team in the way that they work with rapid task changing and expecting that of others?
This is quite close to home. I have a big team and have ADHD, so I don't know. It's reflecting on me, really. It is a challenge, I think, for my team because I do constantly change. I always think I've got a better solution to the problem the next day. And I think it's how you handle it interpersonally as a manager, and how you value people, and how you don't impose, but you negotiate. That's what I would say from my own point of view. And my team stay together, and they are pretty productive, so I think that's okay.
So we have living proof that this can be negotiated and it can turn out into a really good
No, but there's
situation.
there's so many benefits in terms of creativity that comes through. And of course, people come to work in my team partly because of that, and they see the benefits as well as the way that constrains all of our activity. So the main thing is to work, I've learnt a new term, co-intentionally. So everybody works to the same goal in a collaborative way, and that's how I try and work.
Fantastic, that's really helpful, Edmund, thank you. Question for Kate, I think, probably next, about AI. Should we be worried with AI apparently becoming sentient? Are we entering an iRobot world, referring to the Will Smith film? So
No, we should not be worried. It's a long way off. So the idea of sentience and AI is still so far away, even with this whole controversy over Lambda, Google's foundational language model. Again, you could actually say, what does it mean to be sentient? Because if it does mean being able to wrangle language in such a clever way, then maybe we've got to reclassify the idea of sentient. But no, we're very, very long way away from that. We are nowhere yet near artificial general intelligence. Right now, AI is good at very, very narrow tasks and narrow domains. And I think it's going to be that way for the next decade at least. We will see more and more sophisticated language models coming out, but these are all based on syntax and not on semantics. And there's no meaning behind those words, and there's no understanding by the machine of those words. So anything beyond that is really the realm of the philosophers who like to debate what it actually means to be sentient and whether or not language is a way of representing that.
Thanks, Kate. We've probably all been watching in the last few months at some point that amazing new footage of the robot playing basketball. So remember, it wasn't so long ago we were watching robots that couldn't even pick up a box from a table. All of a sudden we're watching robots kind of being able to do this very sophisticated physical activity. So I guess the concern is that we're going to see this sort of leap in AI capacity that reflects something that we saw in robotics. What do you think?
So robots are limited by the AI that goes into them. So AI is kind of, if you think of AI as the brains, it's the software really, and robots as the physical hardware. And you can have robots that don't have any AI in them, like in factory lines and things like that. With the ones that do, and there are some, there's some terrifying looking ones out there. If you think of the Boston Dynamics Spot, which is the robotic dog-like creature that I like to call it a murder dog because it looks as if it could take everyone out. And companies there are some companies that are planning to use that in sort of battlefield tactics, so loading up with weapons. They are really sophisticated in terms of the robotics, but they're also they're very limited in production because these things are very expensive and technologically challenging to make. We are so far away from ever having good humanoid robots because they are really, really complex to make and really expensive and tend to fall over a lot. They're not very good. So the ones you see on kind of YouTube videos and social media of these kind of large human-shaped machines that are going around, they're incredibly limited. They can't get through doors very well, and they fall over a lot. But they don't have the brains. They are limited by the capacity of the AI.
So we won't be replaced by robots anytime soon, providing we keep building in doors to our workplaces. They won't be able to get through the doors. This is the key thing to stop our jobs.
They're quite good at stairs, though. I think one of the things is that the robots are not the threat for our jobs right now, but the AI can be. So we're sort of facing this next industrial revolution where a lot of the work that we do is getting automated. And the reason people are panicking is that now they're coming after the white-collar jobs. Before that, people weren't too bothered with the fact that factory production lines workers were being replaced by robots, but now they're coming for the legal jobs, the advertising jobs, even the academic jobs. So this is the concern now. But there's always going to be a role, I believe, there's always going to be a role for humans in that because it's not smart enough, as we've seen from what I was talking about today. It's not smart enough to take over on its own. You have to have a human in the loop. The other jobs will spring up around this as well, so it's not just taking away jobs.
And Edmund, do you want to come in on that?
I just had a thought. Will it be possible in AI in the future to program in neurodiversity?
Yes, I'd say it would be actually, and
the benefits as well as the costs.
Yeah, and I think it would be, and people are. The way that things are being created today, with a lot of we've got big tech companies who are building things like voice assistants, and they're trying to put more and more personality into them. There's nothing to say we couldn't build in any facet of human behaviour that we particularly want to.
Brilliant. So I hope your dreams are going to be haunted tonight by killer dogs and zombie goldfish, which is the one that I'm failing to shake from my mind, is the zombie goldfish. Let's move to another question. I think this one, Julia, if you don't mind taking this one. How important is our environment and experience and our experiences in guiding what we might give our attention to? And just while you're thinking about an answer to that, I just want to say that I always describe attention as it's the original currency. It's the only real currency we have is our attention and what we devote our attention to. Attention is at the root of love. It's at the root of expressions of desire. It's what do we attend to? That is the only really meaningful currency we have, which is why this is such an important and interesting conversation for the ad world and for the marketing world, because it really taps into something absolutely fundamental. But this question, Julia, is about environment and experience. And since I know your work is quite phenomenological, it attends quite closely to experience and our being in the world and how that relates to attention. I thought this might be a good one for you.
Well, I kind of think that we're all, I'm going to relate this to my writing and teaching practice actually, because I think in a creative writing class, we are all readers of each other. So I have a group of people writing stories and they want to communicate something. It doesn't exist in a vacuum. So when I read something, and we'll have 12 different stories in the room, and we'll have 12 different responses, and we'll have 12 favourites, and we'll have 12 different... It's really interesting how in that situation, everybody is reading the text from the particular seat that they're sitting in the room. And we can talk about that in a more broad sense. I mean, we all know what intersectionality means, but I think John Berger was talking about that back in the 1970s, which is that we have to acknowledge that where we're sitting in the room dictates how we will see something. And that relates to language, that relates to vision, that relates to hearing, all of our sensory. Our bodies are different from each other. Our life experiences are different from each other. So our reactions are going to be different from each other. So I've just I did some work with the university in Exeter, and I had to read 12 pieces of work by young children writers. And it was really interesting because two of them one was a monster story and one was a dinosaur story. And it was really clear that those they were writing from a position of their own obsessions. You know, the stories they were obsessed with monsters. They were obsessed with, and of course I didn't like them. But the researcher told me that actually they'd come up top in the list of the stories that some people had liked because they really liked genre stories. So, you know, our preferences, our tastes, the way that we interact with things that we read on the internet is entirely individual. And I think sometimes we don't make enough space for that, in the way that we read on the internet or the way that we think about people. We put them in boxes and think, oh, well, that's that type of person, that's that type of person. Actually, it completely denies our kind of fluid individuality, which is, I think, very much based in language and in the way that we use and react to language.
And I guess there's a question about whether the putting us all into boxes as advertising and marketing strategies have to do. We have to be put into one bucket or another. You know, is that somehow eroding and working against and reinforcing a much narrower definition of self than the kind of broader and intersectional definition of self that you'd be thinking about? Yes,
I think the broader definition of self that emerges in a workshop is very different from the definition of, you know, that's the space where people can actually look at each other in the eye and talk about difficult things. You know, I want those conversations to happen in a physical, face-to-face environment, really. I think that's why some of those toxic situations in social media, one of the examples that I referred to in my talk, they have really serious real-world social consequences. And I think that's the thing that I'm most concerned about. I think, you know, the internet's amazing. I think some smartphones are fantastic. I love the fact that I can send what I've written to somebody in 2 seconds. I can share things, I can share photographs. All of that's brilliant. I just think that the infrastructure around it, which is based on a particular kind of capitalism, is really, really bad for our social cohesion. And we're noticing the bin fire in number 10 at the moment. That didn't happen by accident.
This is a great segue to another question that I really want us to get to. We'll just take a couple more questions. One more question. That's mean. Okay, one more question. All right, let me go. This one is a good one, though. This question says, I appreciate the dedication to social justice by the panel, but is advertising too closely tied with the accumulation of capital for us to enact positive change? There's another question which I won't read, which is about, you know, how does what we're saying kind of translate into strategies for advertising? I think we're here to kind of vaguely annoy you rather than to help you, actually, or to vaguely annoy you in a way which might be helpful to you. So we're not going to take that question, but we are going to take that very good question to end on, which is about that idea of social justice, but is advertising just too closely connected with the accumulation of capital to be able to take on board some of these issues around diversity and social justice? A real crucial question for us as an audience here today. Any thoughts, Kate?
Yeah, I would say that if you want to look at it from a cynical perspective, it will do your business good if you address these things in the same way that sustainability is now seen as a very good thing for companies, in the same way as B Corp accreditation is seen as very good. So if you want to be taken seriously by your customers who will vote with their feet, then show commitment to these things and not just on a superficial level. So there's definite move towards that, and you can see that in the amount of social media activism that goes on these days. And if a company is called out for not paying attention to these things, that puts you in a very negative light. So it makes good advertising sense and good business sense to pay attention to the social justice aspects.
There you go. That's a good reason. But Bobby, let's end with you.
Oh, thank you. These are systems that we have built. They didn't come into existence. So the fact that they're not a natural phenomenon. There are things that are designed by us, so they can be redesigned and repurposed for a greater good. And I think just to end on the point of from the generational thinking, the generational book, it is very, very clear that there is a period of effect of more focus on that wanting to do good through these structures, through the capitalist structures, through economic structures, through political structures is not driven by a particular generation of young people coming through with a different view. This is a much more generalized sense of change among the population. So there is potential there is demand there, but not being Panglossian about it and saying that that's going to be easy. There is not as simple. There's a lot of things that are pushing us towards a more individualized, less caring environment, but it is within our control and within our gift, and it's within the control and gift of the lots of people representing organizations here. So I wouldn't be fatalistic about it and think that there's nothing that we can do. We can create and recreate these systems for better.
We and you can create these systems for better. So I think that's a great rallying call to end on. Just want to say thanks so much to Lumen and to Mike for sponsoring this stage and inviting us. Centre for Attention Studies at King's, attentionstudies.org. Do keep in touch with us, have a look at what we're doing on that website. And thanks so much finally to all of you. Really, really delighted you've been here with us today for this time. Wonderful to have some of your attention over the last hour or two. And do come and talk to us. We're all going to be, Edmund's looking forward to the hottest mashups, he tells me, in the party later today. So come and talk to us. We'll be around. Thanks so much.
Thank you.